Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Broken Nose Gaming here, and we got our weekly World of Tanks video. So the last time I made a review, it was on the Tier 7 Panther. I have made some progress, as you can see down here. I've managed to make it all the way up into the Tier 10 territory. I have an IS-4, E50M, and I'm actually starting another line branching off down at the KV-1. And I wasn't really intending to do a video on this, but since I'm going to go down this line anyway and get to the IS-7 over here, I figured I might as well look at the KV-1S, which is Tier 6 heavy in Blitz, and I was originally going to compare it to the PC version, but the problem is the PC version's so... It's gone from like a Tier 6 that was similar to this to a Tier 5, and it lost its 122, and then it went back, and it's got a severely nerfed 122. It's the PC version of the KV-1S is sort of a mess, and I didn't really feel like it was worth comparing this tank to the other tank because I feel like this tank is much more well-rounded, and it just doesn't feel so kind of chopped up like the PC version does. So for any sort of comparison, I figured I'd go ahead and I'd compare it against just its other Tier 6 contemporaries. So I have a chart here showing the KV-1S, the KV-2, the M6, the Churchill 7, the VK3601 Henschel, and the ARL-44. Now, this is just grabbed off of a website, blitzstars.com, and it's got all of the stats that I use in my comparison. I actually use blitzstars.com for the Blitz tank stats, and then I use Tanks GG for the PC stats. So today we're just going to be looking straight at the Blitz tanks and their comparisons, and it sort of follows the same stuff that I do. If it's red, that generally is bad. If it's green, that means it's good. But in this case, it's going to be the opposite. If it's green, that means that all the other tanks are better than the KV-1S. If it's red, then that means the KV-1S is better than all the tanks. And right off the bat, you can see it has pretty much the worst DPM of all the Tier 6 heavies. And that's because it does 400 alpha a shot, which aside from the KV-2 and its HE shell, it's basically the strongest AP shell that you'd be firing. I mean, you could fire AP on a KV-2, it's 152, but I don't know. I don't do that. I just fire HE. Anyways, so if you look at the penetration, you can see it's at 160, which is actually recently nerfed from 175, and it's pretty much in line with all the other Tier 6 heavies, save for the ARL-44, which has a really fantastic 212 millimeters of penetration. And outside of that, your M6 has the same amount of pen as your KV-1S. Your Churchill 7 doesn't have that great of pen at 148, but that's still not terrible because that's still right in line with the VK3601. If you're using the 75 millimeter, I think it's called the Konish gun, Konish, German. It's a faster firing, but it has slightly higher pen at 157, but it has reduced alpha at 160. It's the same alpha as the Churchill 7. If you do go up to the 88 millimeter, then you end up going down to 150, but you have 220 alpha. So before, in the PC version, I would say that this, 7.5 centimeter little squeeze bore gun would have been the superior option for the 3601, but in Blitz, it's a toss-up. It just depends on what you want to do. I mean, the 88 millimeter is not a bad tank and gun, especially since it just got buffed. The penetration went to 150 now, so. And then in terms of rate of fire, same thing. It's literally the worst, save for the KV-2, which means it has the worst reload. Caliber 122 millimeters, which is the second best out of everyone else. They're either anywhere from 75 millimeters up to 90. And the shell velocity isn't terrible. It's just behind the Churchill 7, so for such a large caliber shell, that's not bad. But, it's DPM is bad, but you can still make the tank work. In terms of the weapon handling, it's It's not great. The aim time is basically the worst, save for the KV-2 dispersion. Basically the worst, save for the KV-2. Same thing with the, turret uh, rotation dispersion values. The gun depression is basically save for two tanks, the KV-2 and the Churchill 7. It's on par. M6 and the ARL have 10 degrees, and its gun elevation's actually ridiculously good, save for the M6 at 25 degrees, though. I mean, I guess if you're backing up, you can straighten the gun out, but I think where the KV-1S really shines outside of the sort of alpha department is the mobility department, because as you can see in the chart here, it has some of the best statistics when it comes to its speed, its effective horsepower per ton, its power to weight ratio in general, and its terrain resistance. So even though the VK3601 can go 51 kilometers per hour, due to the fact that it has a engine that's 100 horsepower less, and it has less horsepower per ton weight, power to weight ratio at 12.42 versus the 13.76, the KV-1S is going to be more mobile. And the ARL 44 is probably going to be like the second place in terms of how well it works versus the KV-1S. It does have a slower top speed, it does have a bigger engine, and it does have a better power to weight ratio, but it has a worse terrain resistance value set than the KV-1S. So overall, the KV-1S is a fairly mobile tank, and that's probably one of the things where it shines. Now, I ground this tank out, and I think I only used the stock engine, and I still felt like I was pretty mobile. So if you do end up grinding the top engine off of the KV-1S, which is the stock engine on the IS, which is why I didn't, then the tank's even more mobile. And then down at the bottom, the credit coefficients, it's okay. It's not the worst. The M6 is the worst, but it's definitely not the best, because almost every other tank, including the KV-2, outclasses the credit coefficient. But it does have a very low repair cost factor at 4.75, where all the other tanks are at minimum 5.2 or above. It's also a fairly blind tank compared to its contemporaries, the KV-2 being the only other tank that has 230 meters of view range. But, I mean, you shouldn't have to be scouting, so. And then HP values, it's second to last. KV-2 has the least amount of HP, but everything else has anywhere from 150 to 200 more HP. In terms of its armor, it's okay. Again, other tanks like the Churchill 7 are going to be way better, but it's also way slower. And I'd say really the only other tanks that I really like their armor value frontally is going to be the ARL 44 and the M6. In terms of side and rear, the KV-1S is better than both of those tanks in that regard. So all around protection, the KV-1S is probably better, but if you're looking for a head-on fight, there are better options out there. But still, good tank, pretty okay stats. There's definitely better tanks when it comes to its stats, but when it comes to the combination of these things, I feel like you can do okay. Now, I said that I would be only going down to 2 replays, but since this one was sort of spur of the moment, I ended up catching 3 good games, and I'll go ahead and show them to you. But going forward, we'll probably go back down to that 2 replay limit just to keep the videos a little bit shorter. Alright, so we'll get to the replays here. I'll go ahead and start off with this first one down here on Copperfield. It's an all tier 6 matchup here. Now, usually when I'm on Copperfield and I'm in a heavy, I'm going to the right if I spawn on this side, because I feel like the valley's not the best place and it's a shooting gallery, and the far left on this side is good for the mediums and the lights. So I go ahead and I head up this way. The KV-2 will go with me, and I believe, let's see here, the SU-100 maybe? Let me see. He's not doing anything. Oh, there he goes. Okay, so those are the 3 that are coming up here. Me, KV-2, and the SU-100. So I go ahead and I pull up this way, and I kind of come around the corner. I see a VK-3001. I put 421 damage into him already. So that's the neat thing about this tank. Yeah, it takes forever to reload, but I just did 400 damage. Now I pull back out again. I think I'm going to be able to hit the SU-100. Downside about the 122, it's a little wonky. I ended up hitting the gun mantlet. Now the ARL-44 did bounce off of me, so I got lucky there. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of weigh my options. I see that. ARL-44 peeks back out. I see the VK. Now I only have a shot on his hatch. 2 shots and he's almost dead. But that's crazy. So I managed to miss the entire SU-100 front side except for the gun mantlet, but I pick off the VK's hatch, no problem. Now, I didn't know how well I could take that roof, so I fired HE at the ARL. I damaged 2 modules, did almost 200 damage. The nice thing about the HE in this tank is it still does okay damage because it's such a large caliber, but the pen isn't great. So the VK is taken care of. So now I have the ARL over there, and I see a 3601 over on the right. So I have 2 heavies that I'm kind of looking between. The ARL's kind of chilling, so I figured, okay trade. I out-trade him, and the R3001 decides to take a shot, so the 36 definitely loses on that trade. I switch back over to HE, I believe, because I still have the ARL there. The VK bounces, so I said, alright, I'm not going to take any chances. I want to guarantee damage. I fire a whole 160 damage. He takes 240 off me, so I lost in that trade, but still not bad. Now, I'm getting to the point where I'm the only heavy over here now. I think the KV-2 has gone down to the valley. I have a medium, which just ran into me and did a okay trade, I guess. And I think that's it. Now, even he's starting to pull back, so it's just me versus a tank destroyer, a heavy, and I'm assuming another heavy off to the side. I do try to get one more shot. I miss. He gets a shot off on me. And I figure at this point it's not worth staying out here anymore. The 3001 crashes into me again. I'm not quite sure what he's doing at this point. I try to get away. I narrowly miss getting hit by that ARL. But I figure at this front at this point, I don't have enough support. It's just 2 tanks versus at least 3. So I'm going to scoot back a little bit and try to come around the other way. Hopefully the 3001 can hold them there long enough and they don't, you know, decide to charge them at once, which is something I would do. So far that SU-100 suddenly notices that I'm there. I put 400 and some odd damage into him. I'm already up to 2,000 damage. And I'm a little bit worried. For some reason the SU-100 doesn't fire on me. So I decided to keep myself in between this SU-100 that's been wrecked and him, and he misses, and I managed to take him out. So I'm up to 2,200 damage at this point, and the 3001 Porsche is going to be able to take out its 3601 opponent up there, and that's our match. Pretty good match. Pretty good match, all tier 6. Good times. So if we look at the team output here, I did end up doing the most damage on either side. And that's the thing is, all these other tanks, the ARL-44 has better DPM than I do. So does the VK-3601, yet I still outdamaged them. And I feel like just because you have low DPM, if you have like ridiculously high alpha, as long as you're hiding and you're not taking fire, then why does it matter if you have low DPM? Because you're utilizing your DPM by only popping out when you have a shot available. Anyways, we'll go on to the second match here, to Normandy. Again, another all tier 6 match. We got 2 Shermans. a KV-1S on that side, an M6 on that side, and an ARL-44 on that side. I feel like this one's kind of a weird matchup. They're not super greatly balanced. I feel like the Easy 8s on the other side they're not a very strong medium tank. You can still make them work, but I don't think they're equivalent to, like, you know, some of our medium tanks. Anyways, I actually haven't played on this map a whole lot, so I didn't know where to go. I ended up just kind of cruising over here, staying by the fields, and an ARL-44 shows up. I stay in between the valleys there. Our KV-2 wants us to attack. Now this is the only thing that's been spotted so far, so I don't know what I'm going to be dealing with. And now everything else shows up. There's a AT-8, which they can be a pain in the butt. There's an M6 over there, and there's an Easy 8. I missed the Easy 8 entirely, but that's okay because he misses me too. Now the ARL-44 puts a shot into me, which I'm not surprised. The Easy 8 decides not to fire at me, which I'm surprised by. And now he fires at me, but he bounces me. I take his engine out and do almost 400 damage. He repairs the engine pretty quick, though, so... But now, kind of a weird duke out over here. You got an AC-4 Sentinel and a Stritzvon as well. The ARL and the Easy 8 are probably going to make pretty quick work of this Sentinel if I don't jump in. I throw an APCR round into the front end of the ARL-44, puts him down to one shot. I'm hoping somebody can take the ARL-44 out because I still have some time to reload. I figured 2 tanks would be worth, and yeah, he manages to, you know, take care of it. Now I switched over to HE for some reason, and I put one into the side of that Easy 8. I think I was going to try and fire HE at the ARL, and it just didn't happen. Now I come back around. Now I did some damage to the Easy 8 using that HE round, so I figure if I can get a shot where I know it'll pen. Unfortunately, somebody had already taken off a lot of damage off of it. But I saw that it basically was flat armor, and I'm pretty sure I was going to be able to smoke that guy. But now I have an AT-8 and a Cheeto back here. Now, the AT-8, easiest shot is right in its little commander's hatch up there. I do almost 400 damage. And he's... See, that's the thing. You can't really hide that weak spot unless you totally back your tank off. Now I have the Cheeto come back up here, and I ammo rack him. That is the first time I've ammo racked a tank in a long time. So now the AT-8's even more exposed because he's trying to fight the Churchill 7, so I just kind of wait. I wait, and I take him out. So I'm at almost 2,300 damage right now, which is pretty good. And we still have a KV-1S left. And I have a Stritzvon 74A2 going over there. Now, that Stritzvon is definitely within one-shot territory, so I would be a little bit more cautious than just bum-rushing the KV-1S. Luckily, the KV-1S, for some reason, doesn't see me coming up on him, so I fire a shot off on him. He's still really focused on that tank over there instead of me. Now I keep myself in between the rock here. And I'm just kind of sitting here waiting. Now we're starting to put some shots into it because he's going to commit himself to the Churchill 7, and he gets taken out. In the end, I ended up doing about 2,600 damage, yeah. And I ended up getting a high caliber for this particular match. And I was, again, the top in both teams. But even with almost 2,700 damage, I still only ended up getting a first class mark. So I'll tell you one thing about this tank is you got to do quite a bit of damage in order to master this tank. I did not master it in my run, but it was I think this was actually one of my best games in it, and I only got first class out of it. Anyways, let's see our next one here, Rockfield. another all tier 6 match. Oddly enough, I did not get many tier 7 matches in this tank, which just means I didn't see, you know, ISs or Annihilators or whatever. But anyway, where are we going? I think I end up just following the other heavies. There's another KV-1S that has the smaller gun. I think it's 85mm. Faster rate of fire, far less damage, far less pen. Not worth it in my opinion. That's the neat thing about the KV-1S in this game is there's a pretty definite way to play the tank, and it's with the 122. Like, the KV-1S, when it was in the PC version, there was a couple different ways you could play it. There was a point where it even had the short 122 howitzer on there when it was a tier 5, and it was just a faster KV-1 in tier 5. It was weird, so I like the fact that at least in the Blitz version it's pretty defined on what you should be able to do with the tank. Anyways, so there's one VK3001 Porsche that's getting beat up right now. I see an MT25 over there at spawn. Now I don't know if he's AFK or what. His gun's down. Somebody bounces a shot. I figured... I think I fired an HE shell and I did 500 damage on that tank. Here are some tanks that are alive. So, Type 58 bounces a shell off my front. Now, I put one into him. He hits me. I'm still out trading him, but there's also an AT-8 up there. And I'm worried that AT-8's going to pop over the hill and manage to take me down a couple pegs. And there's also an ARL-44 on the ridgeline, along with his friend down below. Oh, that one hurt. I missed the Type 58, and the AT-8, I believe, did exactly what I thought he was going to do, and that was hit me while I was turned. But now, his hatch is right there, and one shot takes him out. So we're already up 5-1. The KV-1S on the other team gets taken out. I'm already up to about 1,200 damage, so we're doing good so far. We have the two ARLs left, and I think, yeah, they're in a platoon. ARLs are good tanks. Not when you show me your lower plate like that, though. And he's totally committed to that other tank chasing him. And I just ram him a little bit, and I think I took more damage from him than me, but whatever. He's taken out. Not have to worry about him anymore. Now, the KV-2 up there is definitely within one-shot territory of that ARL-44. I think the Nashorn puts one into him, and then I put one into him. I fired another HE shell right in the side, did 500 damage, and we get rid of that one, and I closed the match out with 2,200 damage. I only got one kill, but I did end up with a Confederate, and again, only second class, because obviously I did less damage this match than the previous, but still I do end up leading the teams in terms of damage. So even with a long reload, I'm still managing to really take these guys out. So my final thoughts on the KV-1S. As I said earlier, I feel like this tank's a lot more well-rounded in Blitz than it is in the PC version. The Blitz version hasn't had to go from tier 6 to tier 5 to tier 6 or anything like that, I'm assuming. It's kept everything that it's had from the beginning, I'm assuming, aside from a slight nerf in terms of penetration. It's a better example of the tank in terms of how it should play versus the PC version. Does it have low DPM? It does. Does having low DPM mean you're gonna end up not doing a lot of damage in a game? No. I was doing 2,000 damage games no problem with the KV-1S, even though I was only averaging, what, 1,300 damage a minute? Big deal. As long as you keep yourself out of the fight until you need to put yourself into the fight, you're going to do just fine. If you want a tier 6 tank that you can kind of really stomp on with, KV-1S is probably one that I'd keep. I do want to check out the ARL-44 just because those stats seemed so much better, yet the ARLs that I encountered just didn't seem to really, you know, cut it. So I'm really curious if the ARL is better than the KV-1S or if the KV-1S is just the superior tier 6 heavy in terms of the tech tree contemporaries. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. This was a spur of the moment one, but hey, you know, if I have a chance to review a tank that I ended up grinding through, I'm down. I will be continuing on the IS-7 line. I do have the IS ready to go. And the neat thing is, since I've already done the IS-4 line, I don't have a lot of stuff that I have to grind to get through to the IS-7. All the guns are already unlocked. It's just going to be the engines and the turrets and the tracks. But until then, I will see you guys later. Take it easy, and thanks for watching.